Hello, welcome to Beat the Press on TV and streaming online and on mobile. I'm Emily Rooney, and I'm joined by a panel of journalism experts here to weigh in on some of the big media stories of the week. First up, the popular advice now for women who want to succeed in the workplace is to lean in. But this week, former New York Times editor Jill Abramson learned the hard way that while that approach can take you to the top, it can also bring you down. When the New York Times tapped Jill Abramson to lead the newsroom in 2011, it was a breakthrough. America's best paper had its first female editor.
It would be nice to think we would get to the point where it wasn't so remarkable when a woman rose to the top job at an important institution. But I think, we aren't there yet.
She can say that again. This week, Abramson was fired by Times publisher Arthur Sulzberger Jr. and didn't even address the newsroom on her way out.
I was stunned. Look, she got screwed.
A pay dispute seems to have played a role. Abramson hired a lawyer after learning she may have made less than her predecessor, Bill Keller. Then there's Abramson's management style, described as difficult, brusque, and pushy, raising the question, would those traits have doomed a man?
Have there been other editors of the New York Times who were difficult to work with and hotheads? I mean,
I don't have to answer that. Of course.
Of course.
Abramson's replacement is Dean Baquet, who's considered more congenial and also happens to be the paper's first black editor. But at the Times, being a trailblazer doesn't earn you much. So did gender play a role in Jill Abramson's ouster? Here to hash it out, Adam Riley of WGBH News, Josh Benton of the Neiman Journalism Lab, Callie Crossley, also of WGBH News, and Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University. Well, inquiring minds want to know. I'd like to see Barbara Walters land this. It's her last interview tonight. I want to know, right straight from the horse's mouth. I imagine at some point, not necessarily in the near distant future, but in the future, Jill Abramson will sit down and tell, maybe she'll write it, maybe it'll be a piece of the New Yorker, she will tell us what happened. But I'm sure it was a combination of all of these things. The combination that she discovered she was being paid less, I'm sure she was in some kind of a negotiation about that, coupled with the fact that people found her management style brusque, bossy, dare we bring that word up, and that was it.
It's hard. I mean, I still think that there is some fairly large unexplained reason for this. But looking at it at this point, I would say that she's come out of this looking pretty good. And Arthur Sulzberger and the management of the New York Times have come out of this looking very bad. The thing is, regardless of whether she was brusque, complaining about a pay inequity, whatever, the Times is very successful journalistically at the moment, and it's profitable. It's one of the very few big papers you can look at that is making a fairly successful transition to digital, even though a report came out this week saying that they're not moving quickly enough. So it really, on a lot of levels, it just doesn't seem to make any sense.
She got accused of doing, too, trying to push it too fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's worth noting also that, apparently her successor, Dean Baquet, made an end run around her, complaining to Arthur Sulzberger within the past couple weeks, if I remember correctly. So he may have played a role in, getting her axed, whether he intended to or not. Also worth noting that she apparently really had a bad relationship with this guy, Mark Thompson, who they brought over from the BBC to kind of chart the paper's future as CEO. Also worth noting that Arthur Sulzberger canned or pushed out Janet Robinson fairly recently. So, sometimes you'll hear social scientists use the phrase overdetermined, talking about all the factors that lead to an outcome taking place. And this seems to have been overdetermined, I think.
When you get to a group as small as the owner of a newspaper, the editor of a newspaper, the top executives, it really is largely about personalities. And, it seemed the reporting showed years ago that Jill Abramson and Arthur Sulzberger were not best buddies from the very start. There were conflicts. There was a report this week about how Abramson had felt humiliated by Sulzberger at a meeting and was thinking about resigning.
Before she became editor.
Before she even became editor. It is, I think, a sign of the personalities at work here, and the fact that Arthur Sulzberger is still trying to figure out what the transitionary future for the Times is going to be. That report that you mentioned, Dan, on one, it was the committee that produced that was led by Arthur Gregg Sulzberger, who's a reporter at the Times and also the son of the owner of the Times and sort of the heir apparent. And I think it outlined a lot of really remarkable statements about how poor a job the Times' internal culture had done to adjusting to the needs of the internet and the destruction of the business model and the transition to digital. It is remarkable the degree that in 2014, the culture clash between the print people and the digital people is still so strong. And the fact that that happened under Jill Abramson's watch, even though I think she was better at that than her predecessor had been, is an indication that maybe a change was in the right move. It's unclear whether her successor is going to be any better at that, though.
A couple of things. First of all, I was at a journalism conference for women last summer, and she was a speaker, and I asked her a question about culture in the newsroom and some unhappiness about culture in the newsroom, and she did a deft avoid around, and then I came back and said, that's not the question I asked you, and she deftly avoided it around. But there obviously were some conversation even back then about, you know, some people being unhappy. She's not a warm and fuzzy person, but as Tekena let us laugh, which one of these editors ever has been? That is ridiculous. She should be able to not, if you're going to criticize her, do not use that kind of terminology about it. And by the way, let me ask the Oprah question. Did you not know this about her before you hired her and put her in that position? So don't give me that.
One other criticism thrown at her was that she was becoming a celebrity. You know, the first is, you know, she was giving too many interviews. And Sulzberger wanted to know when she was going to stop doing interviews. Well, Jill Robinson had the same problem. She'd become very, very popular, and, you know, she was a celebrity of the sorts, and they didn't like that.
And
let me just say that they have a history, by the way, of being sued by women and by African Americans to get to the point that they're at now, which still needs some work, let me say. And the other thing that I must say, it took them a paragraph and a half to say, oh no, it's not a money issue. She was paid about the same. You know, if it's the same, here's what you say. It's the same.
Yeah.
That's all you say. Right. You don't need a paragraph to say it's kind of about the same. That's what my take on it.